episode of the Business of Business podcast. I'm your host, Roy. Of course, we are the podcast that brings you a wide variety of guests speaking to a diverse set of topics. Hopefully we can shine a light on something maybe you haven't thought about to help you be successful, or if you have something that's keeping you up at night, we'd be glad to, hopefully you can use the information that we're presenting and rely on our professionals that we have to help resolve that. We want to see everybody be successful. Today, we are pleased to have with us Salman Raza. He is, he's the owner of Resolution, which awesome name, by the way. But he's also the author of Life's Nonconformities, an Auditor's Tale of Practical Application of Social, Emotional, and Behavioral Strategies. Salman is a biomedical engineer by qualification, an auditor by profession, and a reformist and visionary at heart. He has lived on 4 continents and worked in 30 countries. The diversity and experiences afforded him an insight into working with different cultures, values, and personality types. He leads trainings and workshops, meeting and teaching 1,000 new people every year. With decades of experience, Salman's work has provided him with better understanding of various emotions and behaviors. Now these practices are found in one place in his new book, again, Life's Nonconformities. Salman, welcome to the show, and thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So you've had a long and winding road. I'd like for you to kind of tell us, how you got here from a biomedical engineer to an auditor. That's quite a leap.
It is and it is not, because I'm in medical device regulations.
Okay.
So biomedical engineering led me to medical device regulations, and then I became auditor, a medical device regulatory auditor.
Okay.
So that enabled me to travel the world and interact with different people, with different size companies, from a $1 billion company to a one-man band. And all sorts of emotions along the way.
Yeah, 4 continents and 30 companies. I mean, that's 4 continents and 30 countries. That's quite expansive, and I'm sure that making that journey, the different cultures, just like you said, the personalities, the practices. I know that you have to be very careful because we have a reference of our country and our practices, but when you step in somebody else's country, they may have a whole different protocol.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And a lot of focus in the business world remains on the technical side of things and the functional side of things, and a lot of soft skills and soft aspects of human interaction.
Right.
After all, we are all human.
Exactly.
And that unfortunately get overlooked, and a lot of times we don't achieve our business goals because of overlooked soft skills, and that's what we are trying to bring to forefront, that we should focus a little more than what we have.
Right. Yeah, and it's my reference point is, I'm not even going to tell you how many years back, but we actually had to do some research and a presentation on doing business in different countries, and it was one of the best exercises that a professor could have ever assigned to us, because I think it's gotten worse today. We're a lot more casual than we were, but even back then, just all the different rituals and things like that, so different. We have to be careful who we talk to. Do you look them in the eye? Do we look down? All these different things.
Yeah, absolutely. The interesting thing on this journey, as I learned, we as a human, you can see in a triangle or a pyramid, the base of it is the most common. The base of a triangle is human nature. So the nature across the globe is exactly the same. We
Right.
all get hungry. We all need some water. We all need some love and care. So that is the human nature.
You're
We
right.
all have the same globally, no difference. But then when we move up towards the apex of the pyramid. In between, there's a layer which is culture, where we are growing up. That is learned. So all these things happening around us, we are consciously and subconsciously we are learning that trait,
Yes.
and that is because we don't even realize because we are growing in that environment. But it's not the human nature. It's taught
Right.
and learned. And then you go further up in the triangle. That's unique to individual. That's personality. That's my personality I'm born with. And of course, my personal experiences, my family, my culture, combined with my personality, combined with my exposure in life, that creates me,
Right.
individual. So there is a few layers that we need to understand, and that makes us complicated human being.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, and that brought to mind that sometimes when we're discussing things, especially with people maybe of a different culture, even if we're on friendly terms, I might say to you, "Oh, well, that's just your perception." But I think what we have to realize is that your perception is your reality. If this is what you've lived with, it could be totally different. From my life experiences, even inside of the U.S., even inside of different cities. And I was just thinking, you're located in Houston, and I'm up in the Fort Worth area. So, two of our reference points. If you come up here, you're going to eat some barbecue and some beef for sure. Being down in Houston, you may run into, the crab boil and things like that. So even within a state, there can be a lot of nuances across that.
Absolutely. If we are not engaging or interacting with people from different cultures and different environments, that gap of awareness increases a great deal. So let me give you some examples, and it
Okay.
perhaps might open up the conversation a little.
Okay.
So I follow Hofstede Insight model for the cultural awareness. So that model describes society in six different dimensions. So there's a one. The first one is power index. So how societies respond to power. So if I'm your boss or I'm at higher hierarchy, how does society see that? So the higher index societies, uh, boss or upper up in the higher management is the god. You don't talk to them, you respect them, you bow to them, you basically they are like your god.
Yeah.
But in low power index societies, yeah, you may have the rank, you may have the title, but you're not better than me. You are just like me.
Yeah.
So countries like China and Russia, they're very high up on power index. However, if you are in Scandinavia, I don't care if you are the CEO, you will stand with me in the same line for food as I would, and they will talk to you such way. I don't have any special privilege. So the society and the expectation, how they respond to power is different.
Yeah.
And if you're hailing from certain culture where power is important, then you, for example, if you are in a classroom in China or in a meeting room in China, questioning or interrupting the presenter is a no-go. You cannot challenge your presenter. He's your higher up. He's your teacher. Whereas if you are in UK or in US or any low index society, they will say, no, this is why I'm here. Ask me question, and
Yeah.
they will encourage you. Similarly, if you are in the different next dimension is individualism and collectivism. So some societies, they believe that individual is responsible for their own welfare. United States is one of them, one of the highest index on individualism. You are responsible for your own welfare, and you are not expected to interfere in anyone's affair.
Yeah.
However, if you are living in a collective society, a lot of Latin America, a lot of Asia, they are collective societies. So you are not carrying yourself only, you are carrying your community, your family.
Yeah.
So these expectations within the social norms are very different. So in Japan, people don't um, leave jobs. In US, if it suits me, my family, my objectives, I will move on. But in Japan, if you leave the job, you bring insult and dishonor to the company and community. So there are several layers of culture that we don't realize that when we interact.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and that's interesting. Because I don't want to get too political, but we're dealing with that here in the U.S. as I assume probably across the world with this pandemic is, where do the individual responsibilities versus the collectivism? It's a very blurred line. So even though we can make the two distinctions, it's still not that easy, going forward, and especially we run into all these different things as we try to do business across the lines. And as we've become a global society, it's not the same as talking to your next door neighbor, trying to sell them an item versus, taking all these different things into account as we do business across the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In the business world, for example,
Yeah.
you do a lot of things out of courtesy. You do a lot of things out of norm, not because you agree with them, but that is the norm of that country.
Right.
So let me give you an example of contract law. When we write a contract law in Western Hemisphere, we go to the every single possibility is written on it, and after 1,000 page of details, you say force majeure. Then you come to force majeure that we don't know what else we can write on. If you're writing a contract law in Asia, in Japan in particular, China, force majeure would probably will be fifth or sixth line, because that culture deals with trust. And if you don't have trust, then what's the point of dealing with it? So if you want me to write that sort of possibilities and eventualities, that means there's lack of trust
Right.
in between parties. And then if you don't trust me, then what's the point dealing and doing business with me? So there is a different perspective.
Yeah.
The intent on United States or UK point of view is not that they don't trust you, it's just they liked everything to be written
Right.
on paper. Whereas in China and Japan and a lot of countries, they say, no, you have to trust me to move forward.
Right.
In same breath, normal practice in Western Hemisphere, we do business during the day, and then you socialize in the evening. You go for dinner, you go for drinks or whatever. In China, when you go to do business, before you talk business, you will socialize.
Yes.
And one of my clients approached me, and then they asked me, we've been drinking for the last 3 days. When are we going to talk business? And I thought, okay, if you're drinking for the last 3 days, that means you will not talk business, because they haven't established trust level they're looking for. So
Right.
they socialize first, establish the trustworthiness. And if you are deemed trustworthy, then they will talk business.
Interesting.
Whereas it's other way around in United States. So it's all about perspective and how things
Yeah.
should be perceived. And
Yeah, and it makes a big difference, because if you come on too strong in those societies and try to skip that socialization piece, they'll basically just cut you out and say, we're not going to do business with you. Not only because we can't establish trust, but you obviously don't understand, our cultural need to establish that trust moving forward.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
and similarly, if you are going into some Latin American societies, that trust is built not necessarily directly. It almost always is through an intermediary.
Mm-hmm.
So you need a reference that someone can trust. So if I'm looking for a service, I will ask within my circle, do you know someone trustworthy? And
Yeah.
then I will go on recommendation. It works in a greater extent that all societies, but a lot more in certain societies. So we need to understand the dynamics of those cultural upbringing and cultural values to penetrate in those situations.
Yeah, we tend to forget that there are a lot of other cultures out there, and we live in our own world until we don't, and then sometimes it's too late if we haven't done our homework on that.
Yeah. And it is very relevant in these cosmopolitan societies because, yes, we are in the United States, but it's a global village. We
Yeah,
are interacting with people who have come and from all corners of the world, and even though they speak the same language, they dress like ourselves, but they subconsciously they have a cultural value that we are not aware of.
right. Yeah,
Certain things can be perceived very differently. So it goes both ways.
yeah. So, what of the 30 countries that you've worked in? What was the most difficult cultural environment that you've been in?
I wouldn't say difficult because they all are, they have their different values and they are, but you just need to be aware and mindful.
Yeah,
So the experience that I had, a lot of countries that I have traveled, uh, you have to adjust your expectation and you have to adjust your routine to a certain extent. So, for example, once I was working in Scandinavia, I think Denmark it was, and I came back from work, stayed in my hotel room, started working again. Before I knew it, it was already almost 8:30 in the evening, and I said, "Oh, I better get out and eat something." So by the time I got out, almost everything was shut. And I thought, oh, I need to be careful. I shouldn't make it to that late. Following week, I was working in Barcelona. And I said, okay, I'll make sure I'll go for my dinner in time. So 7:30 went out and almost everything was shut again. And then they said, come back at 9:30 because we don't open for dinner that early. So, and if
wow.
you're Brazil, it's going even later.
Yeah,
So it's not only the behavior, it's the society, how the common language, the terms. I used to say, we'll do that after lunch, we'll do that before lunch. That lunch is, my perception was 12:30.
right.
In Barcelona, it was 2:30.
Oh,
So so I had to say, no, I should be more specific in terms of
yeah,
time rather than just a generic term after lunch, because after lunch means
right.
different things
Yeah.
in different places.
Yeah, and I've run into that before as well. Here in where I'm from, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock latest, we're sitting down to have dinner, and being in a place like New York or LA, I'd be ready to go back to my hotel and go to bed at like 9 or 10 o'clock, and they're like, "Hey, let's go out and have dinner." They're just kind of getting their night started, and it's and sometimes it can be kind of hard, like to keep up if you're not expecting that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are several layers of it that goes, and this is kind of informal setting. But when you get into the formal settings,
Yeah,
within the organization, the organizational culture and the practices and negotiations and managing teams and working with uh, a different person that may have a different cultural background or personality type,
yeah,
it all gets very difficult.
yeah.
So we have to be a lot more aware and mindful.
Yeah, and the first one you mentioned was the power index. I guess like you were saying, maybe what China and Russia have a little bit different thoughts of their leaders. So when we're doing business in those countries or with that culture, do you have to start at the bottom and work your way up as far as talk maybe having a conversation about your product and if there's interest, or is it expected that you start at the top?
It depends what we are dealing with here. So, for example, the higher up person, the boss, has the ultimate responsibility, and subordinate expect to receive clear instructions from the top. So, if for example, if boss says, I want to do this. I want some ideas. Bring in your ideas. He, in a lot of cases, will lose credibility because you are the boss. You should tell us what to do.
Yeah.
If you don't know why you're the boss,
Oh,
they are
interesting.
expected to lead and they are expected to give instructions. Whereas if you are in low index societies, Scandinavia is one of them. If someone is giving instructions to their subordinates, they say, "Well, you hired me to do the job, then trust me, let me do the job. Why
Right.
why are you bossing me?"
Right.
So there is a difference, and again, you don't have to be in those countries to feel that.
Right.
You can feel all those things in Fort Worth and in Houston and New York,
Yeah.
because we do come across those instances where people feel, and it goes all the way up to personality.
Yeah.
Some personalities, they like specific things and very to the point things, and some personalities like reassurances and validation of what they're doing at the same time. So it's a very mindful thing that we need to be
Yeah.
aware of.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point to remind that even though we're in the states in Fort Worth or Houston, that just because we hire individuals, they are definitely that and individuals, and that's why we have to get to know them, because we have to understand what are the cultural differences, because it affects the way that we manage and our expectations. And I've got a great example. As I had a young lady that worked for me for a while that she was great at her job, but she was very quiet and reserved. And so I might ask her, can you research a couple things for me, get me some, tell me about this more. She would do it immediately, but she was so reserved that she wouldn't speak up. And so, maybe 2, 3 hours later, I'm like, have you had time to look? Oh yeah, I've got it right here. So, it's something I had to learn to manage about her, is that number one, it's okay to interrupt me and let me know, when you get through, or that I just have to know that, I have to keep coming back to her to ask her, when I'm ready for the information, and she will have that. But there
Mhm.
are some other individuals that, you know, you kind of have to pump the brakes on them. They're like, they got the information and they're fixing to get started on something, and you're like, have to pull back. So, again, I think this is why it's so important that we get to know our teams, so we know how to manage each individual. We can't manage a 10, 20, 30 man team all the exact same way.
Exactly, and to get the best out of them,
Right.
we need to find the ways that what ticks them, what makes them feel assured and confident, and
Right.
so that's all the managers ought to do, to give them confidence,
Yeah.
give them assurance and security that whatever their style, whatever their preferences, you are secured and assured, and you are valued.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and that's another thing, like that. Different things make different people feel valued. Again, we can't just apply one method to everybody. We really have to take the time to get to know, and that's not a bad thing. I don't think. I've always suggested that I think, I don't think we take that time nowadays, and everything has gotten shortened up. Instead of even on emails, good morning, how was your day? Having a few pleasantries. It's like, bam, it's like, I need you to do this, or it's just right, curt and to the point. And we've lost a lot of that social interaction, in this digital world that we live in.
That is true.
Yeah.
And again, it probably is generational, but it is happening.
Yeah.
So managing those expectations, understanding um, the requirements. So there are several ways that we need to be mindful of.
Yeah, for sure. So we got to the individual versus the collectivism. What's the number 3 on our list?
Oh, they are six, as I said. So
Yeah.
the two we already spoke about. The third one is so we did power, we did individualism, collectivism, and then there is a uncertainty avoidance. So how societies responds to uncertainty. So that's one. So some societies, they don't mind. They just they find themselves resourceful, innovative, and they said, no, I don't need to know the details. I can just um, uh, wing it, as we call it. We all
Yeah.
just go along and then find a way to do it. I don't need to know the precise detail. There's other societies, they say, no, 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 I need to know if there is a plan, if there is a contingency and all that. So that's another. The third one, which is very important, is the Hofstede insight model described them as masculinity and femininity, but it's not the general masculine and feminine. It's the competitiveness, how societies responds to uh, competitiveness. So do I celebrate my success and brag about it? Or some society says, no, I don't need to brag.
Yeah.
My overall harmony of the society is more important. So a lot of countries that we deal with, they are scales, some are higher, some are lower. They are very competitive. We play hard, we celebrate hard, and that sort of thing. And some, for example, Scandinavian countries, they are so low in that masculinity. You can call them femininity. They care about harmony, so
Right.
they don't like to be differentiated because of the success. So society is willing to pay more tax to bring the gap between rich and poor to bare minimum,
Yeah.
whereas higher competitive societies is no. I have worked hard for it, and I want to be standing out. So there is one of that. So we have seen these four. Then the fifth and final, fifth and sixth were fifth is long-term orientation against short-term orientation. So some societies, they like to plan ahead. They like long-term planning. In their planning, they think, for example, in China, the business plan in as compared to US, we have a 5 year plan, or mostly 3 to 5 year plan, business plan.
Yeah.
In China, 50 year plan, it's 70 year plan. So
Wow.
they have long term orientation. They
Yeah.
don't think of today and
Yeah.
tomorrow. They are
Yeah.
thinking long term.
Yeah.
Even the emergency plans are for 2 3 years. So that brings a different attitude in expectation. So because I don't expect result tomorrow, because
Yeah.
my plan is for 50 years. So
Yeah.
you can invest
Yeah.
earlier, but in that reflect in society. In US, we are relatively short
Yeah.
term oriented. We like nicer house, bigger house. It doesn't have to be full brick. It can be relatively lighter, that can uh, sweep away in one flood, but we like a nicer, shiny thing. Whereas in other societies, they want pure brick. Doesn't have to be big, but it has to be solid that lasts generations.
Yeah.
People in a lot of countries inherit their homes from their great grandparents. So that's the fifth dimension. The sixth one is indulgence. How society respond to pleasure. Some societies are very expressive. They like to express when they are happy. They like to display emotions in public. Some societies don't like that. Some societies are reserved.
Yeah.
So if you are in Latin America or Mexico in particular, they like party. They
Yeah.
like expressing. They like expressing the emotions. But if you are in other countries, such as Asian countries, in China in particular, they're very well reserved.
Yeah.
They don't like to display their emotions in public, even not much anymore. But if you go a few years back, even family pictures, everyone appears very serious. They don't like to smile because it's a public image. They need to be seen as serious.
Yeah.
In the same breath, if you are in a professional meeting in some countries, if you're smiling, you are not taken seriously because you are perceived to be joking around. You're not expert. Why you're smiling? We are here doing serious business.
Yeah.
Whereas in US and Western Hemisphere, you're cracking a joke, to break the ice is traditionally very well received.
Yeah.
So you should be behaving in that fashion. That is the cultural expectation.
Yeah.
So these are the six dimensions that culture brings into
Interesting.
play.
Yeah, and you talked the long term versus short term. It's something, and you're very generous to say American companies look 3 to 5 years, because a lot of the public companies, if they can look 3 months out to the next quarterly earnings, that's long term. That's long term for them,
You're
and
right.
we make some really, and I speak from a little bit of experience that I worked for a huge corporation for a time, and in the beginning, things were different because, we were basically kind of a monopoly. So while we were still public, focus was on service, and then some things happened in the industry, and then all of a sudden, we were a smaller company, and we live quarter to quarter. And I think the thing that really killed me about it is, we would spend we would take action to save $1 today that cost us $5 in 7 months from now. But because this affected the quarterly earnings now, somebody made a decision to not do it the right way. So when you look at the different businesses, the longer term planning, you know, 50 to 70 years, I mean, that's a lot. But basically, in general, do you find that they put into place better plans, more manageable plans when we're looking at 10 years versus, 3 months, 6 months, or a year?
Yeah, and that's a good question. And that the important thing in that we are coming into the pure business territory now.
Yeah.
That aspect, I personally strongly believe a business should always be very well aligned with the vision. What is your vision? Where you want to go, where you're heading. If you lose sight of your vision and you are distracted by numbers, then you will lose sight. So if you know this is where, for example, we are going, I need to go from Houston to Fort Worth, and I know this is where I need to go.
Yeah.
Now, if ride comes along, the most amazing car in the world that is the best ever made, I can be tempted to ride on it
Yeah.
without realizing that it's not even going to Fort Worth.
Right. Right.
So he may well be going to San Antonio or even north.
Yeah.
So if we lose sight, if we distracted by anything, technology, competition, and lose sight of our own vision, that's where the problem occurs. So if we need to decide what is my vision, where I want to go, where I want to lead, once I have that clear path defined, then it helps me identify my strategy. Okay, yes, it is short term, but
Yeah.
it will move me away from my ultimate goal. So the decision making becomes a lot easier if we somehow businesses find a way to continuously assess against their vision. Are we aligned?
Yeah.
So a lot of times in small to medium size, even corporate world, when you get distracted and bogged down into numbers and quarterly performance because you want to win, because you want to earn a bonus, the likelihood is you're moving away from your vision. And
Yeah.
when you're moving away from your vision, and there we have tons of stories what happened.
Yeah.
What happened to Kodak. You know what happened to BlackBerry. There are so many business case studies where you can say, "You are the gods. What happened to you?"
Right. Right. Yeah. And, not to get too far off track, but you can look at Kodak as an example. Is they had the answer right on the shelf, and they just would not pay attention because and some of that, I think, I'll ask this more as a question, but a lot of that gets back to ego. Is we think we're a leader, and we think we will set the pace, but there's always a disruptor looking to disrupt.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and this is where the blind spot occurs.
Yeah.
Ego. You hit the nail on the head. Ego in a business environment it can put you in a blind spot. You don't see what's coming along your way. Blockbuster did to Netflix. They thought, the boy is just trying to sell door to door. They can't compete. That's what Netflix did to blockbusters. The ego is equally, even more important and personal. So our ego restrict us to achieve even more because ego start competing with people we shouldn't be competing.
Yeah.
People, I personally believe, every single individual in this world has something to offer, and there is something for me to gain from, but my ego will restrict them because I get distracted by the obvious behavior and obvious tone of voice or body language I'm seeing, forgetting that there is a wealth of benefit this person has for me,
Right.
I can benefit from. So the ego management, we get threatened easily, we get distracted easily. Let me give you an example of ego, very slightly personal example, and it might listener might find it useful. A few years ago, my 5-year daughter, we were sat together, and she said to me, "Daddy, you look ugly and fat." And I looked at her, and then I smiled. And of course, everyone else around us, they were surprised, but because I was smiling, everyone was. And then I started reflecting on it, and I said, "Why I'm smiling? Why I'm smiling to a comment which, in a general terms, is a very rude and a disappointing, disrespectful and disappointing." To cut a long story short, hopefully you'll get to read the book. It has a whole chapter on it, because my heart is at peace with my daughter. She was not at competition at any level, any psychological level. She is not posing any threat to me. Psychologically, consciously, subconsciously, I'm at peace. She is not threatening me. However, that comment, if said by anyone else in the world, would have triggered my ego.
Right.
How dare you say that?
Yeah.
How dare? So my inner, even though I may not have uttered those words, but my heart, my mind is thinking, how dare? And that happens every single day in our lives. We don't have awareness of the ego triggers. What triggers my ego?
Yeah.
And once the ego is triggered, I'm not rational self.
Right.
I will
Right.
make decision that I will regret. So the whole point of ego, it's same. It happens in company settings, business settings, and it happens in personal life every single day, several times a day.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of that, so throughout the different countries that you've worked in, how do egos compare? I mean, as far as like Americans have bigger egos, it's more involved versus other countries. What did you observe there?
It is a combination. So you cannot drill down to purely on culture, because there's so many other things at play. So it's not purely dependent on culture. It's very much on personality types and the settings. However, the high PDI countries, they may behave differently. They have more, they are they grew up in a society where they can take a lot more from their hierarchy. So if boss is yelling at you, the chances of an American losing control a lot higher, because they are not used to taking it.
Yeah.
Whereas if boss is giving you a hard time, those societies, those individuals, they have learned to tolerate a little more. That doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. We're not talking about the morality of it. We're just talking about in terms of taking it. How do we respond? The term I use in my book quite frequently, never react, always respond.
Yes.
Because reaction is impulsive.
Right.
And response is measured. So if certain societies and certain personalities and certain awareness, uh, we able to minimize the reaction and maximize the
Yeah.
response. So this is what
Yeah.
leads, and it's a combination of a lot of things.
Yeah, and I just had a guest on that was a therapist that deals with a lot, of emotions in the workplace, and that was one thing we were talking about is that difference between reaction and a response, and a lot of the literature out there says count 1 to 5. It's okay to have a reaction. I mean, that's who we are. We react to certain things, certain stimulus, but it's the response. If we will count to 5, we will have a much more measured response than what we normally if we would have just blurted out.
Yeah. So that doesn't mean that we don't want to communicate the displeasure or
Right.
the seriousness of the issue. The response may well be strong.
Yes.
Response may well be potent and
Right.
formidable. However, it's more appropriate, thought through,
Yeah.
rather than impulsive.
Yeah. Yeah, because what I've noticed is impulsive tends to lead to more personal responses instead of a response on the issue, targeting the issue.
Exactly.
We can have a very productive, hopefully, conversation about something that we disagree, but the minute I say that, I don't like you because you have a shirt on that's, it's hard to, it may be gray or green, but, I don't like, the pattern of your shirt. You're a bad dresser. We just start going off the edge instead of being onto the issue of, what the discord is actually about.
And absolutely. And
Yeah.
it is built down to the ego management.
Yeah.
And it's so important because my ego is triggered.
Yeah.
I'm losing sight of what is the issue, what we're talking about.
Yeah.
My ego is kind of leading me in a non-rational direction where it's getting personal. I want my ego at any cost
Yeah.
needs to win,
Yeah.
needs to have upper hand.
Yeah. And I think it's, I don't know. From my opinion, I'm not a scientist or in the behavioral realm, but it's also like it's that the winningness is that if I can make you feel bad, or if I can say something bad about you, then all of a sudden it makes me, well, in theory, they think it makes them a winner or bigger or better or whatever. When really it just is the opposite. People see people react that way, and you just have to shake your head and say, what's up with that? Because guess what? We still got the same problem we had before we deteriorated into this personal thing. And if we're at work, especially, or well, even in a family environment, we need to solve the problem. And the way that we do that, I feel, is through communication. Sometimes we have to just say, what? We got to agree to disagree and leave it at that. But, in a work environment, more or less, we may have to actually come to a solution that we can both live with.
Yeah, and its communication is important. Sometimes you don't even need to solve the problem. Just hear them out.
Yeah, right.
Just give them assurance that what you're thinking is not wrong necessarily.
Yeah.
However, you can lead the conversation so you're not suggesting the other person is wrong, triggering their ego.
Yeah.
It's valid, it's correct. However, we have mitigations or we'll deal blah blah. So how we communicate is very important.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's another big point too, is that if you have a feeling about something, that we can't say that your feeling is wrong. I mean, you have that based on your lived experiences, so we have to we have to see what that's all about. But then we get back to that perception issue, is that your perception of whatever this is, that is based in, well, it's your reality, but it's based in your life experiences. That's why you perceive that.
And that is possibly is due to the personality types.
Yeah.
We have several personality types. Some personalities we call them Myers-Briggs terminologies. They're driven by the feelings of rather than logic. So it
Right.
doesn't mean that they don't exist. We need to understand that the
Yeah.
individual in front of me may be driven by feelings. So I need to give them assurance, not logic,
Yeah.
because logic will not go well. I need to give them assurance
Right.
that makes them feel comfortable rather than giving them a logical juggernaut that we think will solve the problem.
Yeah.
No, it won't, because they are looking for emotional validation that what they had felt was correct.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
for them, it's
Yeah, and you mentioned this. I can't speak culturally. I can speak to male, female. A huge mistake that I'm guilty of in my relationship is sometimes she just wants to talk. She doesn't want an answer or solve the problem. It's hard. The males, when we hear things, we always want to solve the problem. Where women, they're pretty good about just like letting us vent and listening to it.
absolutely. And funny enough, yeah, there is a bias and there's a gender bias in feeling type and perceiving a logical type in males and females. However, it's not guaranteed. I have known males who have feeling types and females
Yeah.
uh, who are logical. So I agree with you. But just we need to understand. So just because they are male, they will be logical, and they're female, they will be feeling ignorant. It's not always true.
Yeah.
I have seen other way around
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
But you're right. If there are different personality types, we need to understand.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, and again, it gets back to understanding and being present, being mindful, taking the time to understand because it can drive a real wedge. And now I don't have any problem saying, "Are you just venting? Or are you looking for an answer?" Because that way I can shift to just listen mode, or I can be, the wheels be turning about, do we need to try to solve this problem? And so again, I try not to be quite that abrupt, but sometimes if we don't understand the situation, it never hurts to just ask. It can save us a lot of heartache.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
All right. Well, we certainly appreciate you taking time to be here. Is there anything else, any other points that you want to leave us with before we wrap this up?
I think the biggest takeaway for me for your audience is to become life learners. Don't take things for granted. There's a lot of soft skills that we should be aware of, personality types. There are different types of people. Value individual. Every
Yeah.
single person in this world has something to offer. It doesn't
Right.
matter who that person is, what their title is, they have something to offer. And if we have that attitude, it doesn't matter the race, color, language, culture. If I somehow truly believe to the core of my existence that the person next to me has something valuable to for me, my attitude will change, and
Yeah.
I will have a different
Yeah.
personality and outlook to the world.
No, I can't say how strongly I believe in that. That we just have to be kind to each other and know that me trying to put you down is not going to make me any better of a place, and vice versa. That we have to understand that everybody has that value to offer at some point.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for being with us. So, do you have a habit or a tool? Is there something that you use in your everyday life that you feel adds a lot of value?
Absolutely, there are a few.
Okay.
So there are a few. So one of the things um, I speak in detail in my book is, as I said, always respond, never react. And the other ones that I say, um, um, always be honest to yourself. So be honest. You can mislead others, but never be misleading your own self. So be
Yeah.
honest to yourself and find a balance. Whatever you do, you have to find the right balance. Whether you want to, whatever you do, find the right balance of managing expectations.
Yeah.
And finally, the third one is whatever you do, whatever you enjoy doing, you have to be consistent. Do it consistently. Just doing once, being nice once is not enough.
Yeah,
If
right.
you want
Yeah,
to be nice, you have to do it day in, day out, minute in, minute out. So
exactly.
honesty, balance, and consistency.
Yeah, and then that consistency thing too. I think we have to look at our result over a long period of time. We can't just do that thing once, and if it doesn't work out or we don't get the reaction that we're looking for, that doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means that it didn't work in that instance. And we can't get discouraged. We still have to keep doing that.
We keep doing it
Yeah.
until we get it right.
Yeah.
Thomas Edison says, I haven't failed 700 times. I just know 700 times it doesn't work.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being with. Also, tell us a little bit about. I love the name of this, Resolution. That's your company name. Tell us a little bit about Resolution. How who do you like to work with? How they could reach out and get a hold. What you could do for them, and of course, how could they reach out and get a hold of you, and where we can
Absolutely.
find the book as well.
So Resolution is primarily focusing on three fundamental aspects of it, business. So we believe that there are three fundamentals that any business enterprise need to have in sync to succeed. So the first one, we touch upon it, is vision. We need to have very clear vision, what we want to do, what we want to achieve, and that drives the correct strategy. So vision and strategy. So that's one. Then the second piece in any enterprise is your infrastructure. How you're going to do it. So first bit is what, and then the next one is how. So you need to have a system, you need to have infrastructure, procedures, process, the infrastructure that you need to make it happen.
Yeah.
And then the third and the most important of all is people who will do it. So your team, you need to have a team that can deliver your vision using the process that you feel it works. So these are the three fundamental aspects of any successful business enterprise. At Resolution, we give those advice, all three, what we call it 360-degree services, fine-tuning the vision and strategy, putting in place the infrastructure in relation to process, and then training and making your team competent through cultural awareness, personality awareness, team building, and overall leadership. So that's what we do at Resolution. Okay. We can be reached at resolution.com. So the book that we have written is purely focusing on the human side of things. Yeah. And hopefully we will contribute on other aspects in the coming future.
Okay. And great. And what's your website that they can reach out there?
Yeah, it's resolution.com.
Okay.
RAZALUTION.com. And we'll be happy to be at your service.
Yeah, and I'll be sure and include that in the show notes. And can they find information on the book there as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So there is a book information, but there is an additional website,
okay,
which is salmanraza.net, which is specifically for the book.
Okay.
So again, SALMAN, Raza, RAZA.net, and this is primarily dedicated for the book. And they can find a lot more about the book and how to get in touch.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, reach out, get a copy of this book for sure. I think my opinion, again, it's that, with the digital age and texting and this, it's like we get further and further away from this human interaction, but I think that we really need to be conscious of everybody comes from a different place in how we treat people, how we react, how we have discussions. It's very important, not only in business, but also in our personal lives as well. So reach out. Also, if you're needing some help with the vision, your infrastructure, people, let Salman and his group tie that all together for you, put you on the right path to success. That's going to do it for another episode of the Business of Business podcast. Thank you for listening. You can also find us at www.thebusinessofbusinesspodcast.com. We're on all the major podcast platforms, iTunes, Stitcher, Google, Spotify. If we're not on one that you listen to, please reach out. I'd be glad to add it and make your listening easier. We're also on all the major social media platforms. Probably tend to hang out on Instagram a little bit more, so please send us a message. We'd love to interact with you there. A video of this interview will go up when the episode goes live, so you can check that out over at our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of your business.